He, in a sense, blended into the simple life of Nazareth. But understand this, he was still the Son of God. He was holy, perfect, righteous, but unknown. But known to his family, known to his mother, and she knew the truth about him from the beginning because she heard it from Gabriel, as we read earlier. She knew the truth, and she pondered it in her heart. But the rest of the family, Joseph now is gone. He disappears very soon in the accounts of the gospel, so he no doubt had died. And you have the brothers and sisters in the family, and they, even with their mother's testimony and whatever of their father's testimony they heard concerning the birth of their half-brother, they thought he was a man. That is a positive in one sense. His humanity was so real. His humanity was so complete and comprehensive. He was so truly human that his family couldn't believe that he was also truly divine, even in the face of his perfections. Even though he never sinned, was holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, they might have thought he was odd, but they didn't think he was God. They thought he had lost his mind, that his rational capabilities had failed him. Because no sane person would say, I'm God. Crazy people say that. So they went to take him captive for his own sake and theirs. The term to take custody of him is literally to seize. 15 times in Mark, 8 times it was about seizing Jesus, including his arrest. It's also a verb that was used when John the Baptist was arrested in the 6th chapter. So this is an intervention to capture one that they cared about, one that they no doubt loved, who is in danger because of his lunacy, because he's out of his mind. And by the way, John chapter 7, verse 5 says his brothers didn't believe in him. Point blank, his brothers were not believing in him. If you look over at the 6th chapter of Mark for just a moment, Jesus came into his hometown of Nazareth in verse 1 with his disciples. This is back in his hometown. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and the many listeners were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what is this wisdom given to him? And such miracles as these performed by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" They took offense at him. This is just the carpenter. This is the son of Mary. Joseph's not mentioned, as I said, no doubt had died. We know his brothers. We know his sisters. They took offense at the notion that he was claiming to be God, even though they saw the miracles. They said that. Where did he get the power to do these miracles? And Jesus responded in verse 4 with a famous line, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown and among his own relatives and in his own household." How strange that is, that they who had lived with him for 30 years thought he had lost his mind, couldn't see that he was divine. Now, if you go back to Mark 3 and verse 31, we jump ahead in the story a little bit to pick up the family. The family are coming to get Jesus back in verse 21. They arrive in verse 31. His mother and his brothers arrived, and standing outside, they sent word to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him as always, and they said to him, "Behold, your mother and your brothers are outside looking for you." Again, this is their intervention to save him from his insanity if they can. Then Jesus says something that is shocking. Verse 33. Answering the people who were telling him, "Your mother and brothers are looking for you," he said, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" What do you mean? That he didn't know them? No, of course he knew them. Of course he knew them. At the cross, we read in John 19 that he gave his mother into the care of John, very much aware of her. Of course he knew who they were. But he was changing the category of conversation from earthly relationships to heavenly ones. He's now talking about his kingdom. Who are my mother and my brothers? Verse 34, looking about at those who were sitting around him, he said, "Behold, my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother." The Lord seized the moment to speak of salvation truth. He was not concerned about the human relationships. They were not the relationships that mattered. There was no particular privilege for Mary that set her apart from the need for a Savior. She said that in Luke 1. God, my Savior. She was not sinless. She needed a Savior. She was his mother in the earthly sense, but not in the kingdom sense until she had trusted in him as Savior.